Okay, it's just before Christmas. I have not done a recording in almost a month, so I want to thank my guest Darrell Williams, who's with me today. I actually had to reschedule on Darrell last month just due to some personal stuff, but he was kind enough to be flexible with me, so I thank him for being here today. But let me introduce Darrell real quick. Darrell is the CEO of Alliance Seminars Coaching. They're a veteran-owned faith-based coaching organization that offers motivational speaking, certified workshops, and various coaching services. I'm going to ask him to just kind of add some color to that. But Darrell, thank you for being with me today.
Dave, thanks for having me, man. Appreciate you and all that you do.
Hey, can you give me a little bit of just a little detail for the audience on what kind of coaching you do, what kind of clients you serve, and then we can kind of dive into the topic.
Sure. So Alliance Seminars Coaching basically came out of my experience really in the military. I grew up in Compton, California. So those that are familiar with the movie Boys in the Hood or Straight Out of Compton, right? That was the environment that I grew in. And at that time, I believe it was the fourth most dangerous city in the world, right? So the key for me was, how do I change my path? How do I do something different? And for me, I chose the military. And while I was in the military, I just met some incredible people that were incredible leaders. And we're getting all this training for free, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, the world needs this, right? And once I retired, well, even while I was in, I started helping others. But mainly when I retired, I really wanted to pay it forward. And that was one of the things that I talked to a couple of mentors who were telling me that they were getting into coaching. And once I did my research on it, I was like, oh, I can do that. That's a good way to helping people. Because my whole theme in my life is, how do I pay it forward? How do I help somebody else? So coaching was one of those avenues that was an easy fixture for me. So then from there, they always tell you, okay, find your niche, right? What are you good at? And for me, I always wanted to make sure my niche was compared to my passion. So my passion was always leadership, right? Just helping people become a leader, letting them know that you don't have to be in the military to be a great leader, right? You can do it from different aspects of life. Purpose, right? I used to be a youth pastor, so there's a lot of young people that are looking for, why am I here, right? What am I good at, right? So then I found out that adults were going through that as well. So the purpose coaching came from that piece. And then the last part of that is relationships, right? Been married for 23 years. My wife and I are over the marriage ministry at our church. And there are some people that never come to the church. They don't want to hear about the church, right? All they know is, hey, I got some problems with my spouse and I need to fix it. And so we use the coaching piece, which has nothing to do with religious aspects at all. It's just getting to the heart of the matter of, okay, what can we do to take care of these hiccups, right, in your relationship? So the coaching kind of took on that form of leadership, purpose, and relationships.
Okay, and are you coaching individuals or are you coaching organizations or both?
So I do individuals through Alliance Seminars Coaching, and then I do groups through another organization, agency that I'm a part of.
Got it. Got it. All right. So go back to the military really quickly. So
Sure.
you joined by choice. Nobody said you got to go there. You chose to go. So
Yes.
at what point during your experience with the military did you say, wow, this is you talked about all this free coaching and training and advice.
Mhm.
Why isn't this available to everybody? Do you remember exactly what it was you were doing or what you heard at that moment where you said, I can't believe this isn't accessible to just the average person?
Absolutely, Dave. I'm telling you, it was basic training right off the get-go, right? You got all these individuals. Think about this. A lot of people hear about the military and those that may not have family members associated with it. Just think about, all these people with different backgrounds, different values, right? Maybe not even ever seeing, right, somebody from this particular race or color ever coming together under this one umbrella, right, to learn about themselves and at the end, learn about teamwork, what it takes to be a leader, right? And then here's the biggest thing, what it feels like to be some part of something that's bigger than yourself. When those drill sergeants would speak, right, and then when they said something to the fact, David, was, doesn't matter how fast you are, doesn't matter how strong you are, doesn't matter how smart you will not get through this training as an individual. If you do not come together as a team, you will not make it. And it was so interesting, Dave, because you had some people that had their own mindset, like, yeah, they probably just say that to every class, right? But I'm going to be the exception. I'm going to be the difference. And the first time, one of the first things they do is they partner you up with somebody. It's called the battle buddy.
Mm-hmm.
This person, Dave, might be from Oklahoma and you're from Detroit, Michigan. Two total opposites. But it's like everywhere Dave goes, Darrell better be there. Right. And that's like day one. And if you try to test it, like, man, they're not serious about that. Let them catch you by yourself. And it's like, get down, do 20 push-ups. And after a while, you start getting tired of doing those push-ups. Like, okay, Dave, are you ready? Let's go. Because we got to make sure we're in formation together. We're going to training together. Right. I'm holding your weapon while you're going to take care of what you need to take care of before class starts, and you're holding mine. So just that whole concept of it can be done. You can take people from different backgrounds and make them into a team. It was just amazing to me.
Right, right. Well, what were your thoughts? Go back to growing up in Compton. I've never been there. I've heard all the music and the songs, and I've seen the movies, but I don't know what it's really like. What was it like for you growing up there?
So for me, it was different because you have a lot of, during that time, that was kind of the heavy part of the media attention, which was definitely the gang violence, the drugs. It was really bad. But then there was another part of Compton that wasn't like that, right? Where you had people just doing really good things and trying to make it. So for me, I was caught in the middle, right? It was like you got these people that's trying to recruit you to be in their gang, people trying to recruit you to sell drugs. And it's like, that's one thing I learned, Dave, early on, that you have to have a value system. Doesn't matter what it is, right? Because if you live your values earnestly enough, people will respect you. Not saying they will like you, not saying they won't stop picking on you or messing with you, but I found that they will do it less because they're like, hey, this guy's not about that. Man, he's just trying to make it, leave this guy alone, right? Because I went through, a lot of the peer pressure and, the kids mess with other kids, those type of bullying, right? Things like that. It was just a part almost like, you had to go through it. But what was good for me was I had a lot of other guys that had similar values as I did. So even though we probably was big enough to start our own gang, we weren't in a gang, right? But we just represented what goodness was like, what hard work was like, what trying to just make it, right, was like. And I think a lot of the gangsters in that time, they kind of just respected that. They were like, oh, okay, this guy's trying to do something different. I respect that, right? Now, it doesn't mean that I could go to any neighborhood because there are other people in other neighborhoods that didn't care what I did. If I was part of what they call a Crip neighborhood, then I better know somebody over there or else I was going to get jumped. And for me, one of the things that we talked about before we started recording was, rap music started coming out, back, when I was in high school. And here's a quick story. My high school was so terrible with gang violence. The principal at that time was like, we got to do something. This is just getting ridiculous. And kudos to him, man, being a forward thinker. He was like, hey, kids like music. What if we get this DJ that plays at lunchtime? And the only caveat is, as long as there's no violence, we'll bring the DJ once a week. But as soon as there's violence, the music stops. And at that time, Dave, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm not a DJ, but, I kind of like this rap thing. That sounds pretty cool, right? Maybe if I do that, right, I could be a little popular. So I started learning my lyrics and becoming a little junior rapper. And it was so cool was when they picked a DJ, which is Norman Parker. He was like, hey, guys, I'm going to need some people to rap on the mic, just to kind of keep everything different. And I was one of 5 people that he picked. So I felt that was an honor, right? And it was so amazing when the DJ came and they put out that announcement. It was just weird, Dave, but it just seemed like all the gangsters put the word out. It's like, hey, ceasefire, neutral truce. We like this. We enjoy this. Let's not mess this up. So my junior year at Compton High and going into my senior year, a lot of the violence, it didn't totally go away, but definitely within the school itself, it definitely lessened.
Every time I go to a concert, and it's been a while since I've been to one, that's always my observation outside of the music and the entertainment is staring across whatever 100,000 people,
Yes.
whoever's there, whether in a cafeteria or in a stadium, and all
Right.
the different faces and all the different ages and all the different looks, and everyone's there for the same thing. It's like everyone gets along. And isn't
Yes.
it's crazy because like the answers are sometimes that simple. Like you just put music on, you realize how people are all the same. But it's like it seems like such a, oh, that's whatever, we just played music and everyone got along, but it's a really big deal.
It was a big deal. And the fact that, I was thinking about that, music comes Savage Beast approach, right? And to me, it definitely seemed that way because those guys could have like, I mean, they could have told the principal, yeah, whatever, you don't tell us what to do. We're going to do what we're going to do. This is our territory. We're trying to take over the school. But like you said, something got to them
Yeah.
where it was like, you know what? This guy's trying to do something for us. And that's what my take out of it. It's like, so why can't we just give a little bit back?
Yeah.
Right. Instead of jumping somebody right at school, we'll jump them after school, which again, the knowledge and it doesn't make sense, but in their mind, that was their way of the give and take. And an interesting thing was my DJ friend was so popular. Right, because again, in our school, you had Bloods, you had Crips, right? Just two different types of gangsters and neighborhoods. And he would get invites that was like, hey, we're throwing a house party, we're throwing a block party, we're doing a birthday party, can you come? And so something that he was just doing just as a hobby, he ended up making money off of it. And then he would invite us and we weren't getting paid, but it was like, we don't care about the money. We can go into these different neighborhoods, right? And not have to worry about anything. And we were kind of like the mini stars of the party, so it was just a lot of residuals that came out of that situation.
All right. I know we're not supposed to be talking about this, but I have to ask you. So
Gotcha.
Bloods and Crips, I know
Mhm.
two totally distinct gangs. What's the difference between both of them? Do they stand for different things other than
Man,
the
that's a
color?
lot of yeah, it's a lot of history on that, but it really, I don't remember the deepness of it, but it was basically just came down to two different groups, two different thought patterns, and it was kind of like either with this group or you with this other group. And it's just amazing, when you're living it, right, you're just trying to make it, right? But after you come through that, you start thinking back like, man, that was such a crazy time. And then you just wondered the whole behavioral science behind it. It was like, what makes people think, that they have to choose something like that to live that type of background. And I think, it's so more different intricate parts of it, but some of it was a platform that could morph into something, right? If it started off with just protecting a certain territory or protecting whatever, then you start infiltrating, gang selling drugs in it. So now it's like this group is selling drugs and this group is selling drugs. I need to take over your territory to make sure mine is more. And then even within the different Crips and Bloods, there's other little subgroups, right, that's trying to take over. So it's just so many deep layers of that. But I tell you, Dave, I look back on it now and I tie it back to, again, everyone has a purpose. And I can honestly say, and I can't wait to do a TED talk on this one day, that even people that are gang leaders have a particular style of leadership, right? That does something to others that says, hey, I want to follow Dave. Right? Whatever I don't have in my household, I don't have a male figure, whatever that case is, right? I like what Dave represents. I want to be like Dave. I want to be initiated into Dave's group, right? And whatever it takes. Now it's like, even though it's all negative, but still, Dave is teaching me something on the streets that I don't know or that I didn't know. And it's just a weird concept. But again, the guys that are selling the drugs, the guys that are, the money piece of it, right? Like these guys are probably financial geniuses, but yet they're just using those gifts in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to talk about where you ended up because it's so interesting because you've met a couple of presidents, you've worked in the
Yes,
White
sir.
House, and I want to get into that. But
Sure.
the other question I had was, and it sounds like you were accepted for the path you took. Two questions. One, did you have a strong family unit around you that kept you straight and narrow, or was that just you? That's one question. The other question is when you chose the military as your path and then ended up where you ended up today, was there any part of the old guard that rejected you for it, where, you know, you chose that path, you know, you are not, you abandon your past, just out of
Right.
curiosity?
No, great question. So first part is I definitely had a good family base. I was very fortunate. I didn't like it at the time, just like most kids, right? My mom was very religious, faith-based background, and you know we had to go to church, right? So it wasn't an option, and I didn't like it at all in the beginning days. It was like, why am I going to church? You know, I grew up in Compton, right? So football games come on at 10 o'clock, right? I'm catching like all the games at 10, the afternoon games at 1. Life is good. And it was almost like, why do I have to go to church and none of my friends go, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't realize she was teaching me, again, values. She's like, you know, you can do whatever you want when you leave this house, but I at least want to instill something inside of you about goodness, about making right decisions. And it wasn't even about the God piece, even though I was a part of it, but it was really about how do you make good decisions? How do you make good choices? How do you treat other humans? How do you want to be treated? I mean, and that's what I got from that. So that family base definitely was a part of me. The second part, which is really crazy, right? Making a decision that I made, the old guard actually supported me. It was so weird, right? When I told the individuals I was joining the military, because I joined, they call it the delayed entry program. So I was in 11th grade going into my senior year already signed up for the Army. I just had to keep my nose clean and not get in trouble. So you still have the teasing of, oh, you're too small, you know, you're only about 99 pounds, right? 100 pounds wet, you know, they're going to send you back home as soon as, you know, you get the basic training. But once I went through the basic training and, you know, I had my challenges there and got through the advanced and training, I would come back to the neighborhood. And it was one of those things, Dave, where it was like, I don't know, maybe at that time it was some part of it was to prove that I'd made it, but then maybe another part of it was to show them like, hey guys, there's a whole nother world out here. You can take what you're good at and use it for something, you know, different, creative career path. And like we'll talk about, you know, once I made it to, you know, the White House, I mean, I would actually on days when we would come back to California for presidential trips, I would actually, if I had time off, right, I would drive through the neighborhood and, you know, see a rental car coming through there. Obviously, you know, people are like, okay, who's that? You know, is this going to be trouble? And then I would roll the windows down like, hey, it's D. And they're like, oh man, what's going on? And Dave, we would talk. And it was so funny. They would catch me up on what's going on in the neighborhood, but then they would also want to know, you know, where have you gone? You know, who have you met? What have you done? And even though we're telling two different stories, Dave, I didn't know it then, but what I found out was there was a sense of pride in the neighborhood that one of us made it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. They never had to say it, but it was just that pride. And then like every time we were in the conversation, right, they would say something like, hey man, keep doing what you're doing, keep representing the neighborhood, you know, let the world know that, you know, everybody's not gangsters, right? Even though they were gangsters, but it was so funny, but they would make that comment, you know, there are good things that come from the hood. So it was kind of like I don't know, like a path of a badge of honor that they also took credit in.
It's such a cool story. You know, my only experience of any dangerous area is on TV.
Mhm.
You know, like
Sure, sure.
we've got some bad areas in Massachusetts. I mean, every state's got some more, you know,
Yes, it
dangerous.
does.
And
Yes,
it's
it
not like
does.
I haven't driven through them or walked through them. And
Sure, sure.
to be honest, I've never had a problem ever, ever, ever. But what would bother me is if I was from the area, I can't, it's just that the news is only showing what's wrong. And I just
Sure.
wonder at some level, if you go back with some fond memories and you go back to people that support you and feel
Hmm.
happy for you. And
Hmm.
yet when they're, you know, and I don't know what the news is like out in California, but you know, here, every other story is about some bad thing that's happening in a neighborhood, never
Pretty
the
much the
good stuff.
same.
Yeah. So,
Yep.
but I mean, doesn't that drive you crazy? Like at some point, when we talk about like some of these good people?
Yeah, it does. And the funny part is, you know, when I traveled, you know, working for White House Communication Agency, you know, I had the fortunate opportunity to see all the different newscasts and how they present the news. But it was a common theme, unfortunately, Dave, that everybody kind of reports it the same way. It's like, here's that hard hitting stuff that's going to get your attention. And then it's so funny, Dave, at the very end, it's like, oh, here's this one feel good story.
Yeah, we saved a cat in a tree. Yeah, yeah. Some stupid story. I know.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah.
me crazy. I would go
does.
crazy because I mean, you had, I mean, your mother, it sounds like she was just, oh, this is the way it's going to be, and you're going to learn
Yeah.
these things. And
Yeah.
look, it paid off. And I'm sure there are plenty of other examples of
It
that.
is. It is. It definitely is. And then the other weird part was like my dad, right? He was there, but he didn't go to church. So talking about the double standard of, hey, do what your mom says, right? But yet he's sitting on the couch waiting for the game to come on. I'm like, this just isn't right. But I didn't have any voice back then, so I just did what I had to do and come back and ask them what did I miss. But you're right. There's a lot of good stories out there. A lot of good people with talented, and that's one thing I have seen throughout my life, the military, and even working at the White House. There's so many talented people that come from so many different parts of the world. It's just amazing. And that's why I'm never surprised when technology grows or different venues are created or different things, because people are just, like I said, everybody has a gift. I've seen it.
So tell me the first time you actually found yourself in the White House. What the heck went through your head?
Oh my gosh. So first of all, I'm at this regular unit in the Pentagon, right? It's a Friday. And we get this announcement that the White House Communication Agency is recruiting. And we're like, this is how naive me and my friend were, Dave. Instead of us being focused on the White House part, we were focused on they're doing interviews on a Friday morning. So in our mind, it's like if we do this interview Friday, right, and stretch it out enough, we can be off for the rest of the day. It was not even trying to join at all. It was honestly just trying to get out of work. So I go fill out the paperwork, go through the interview process. Didn't hear anything until like months later. My friend didn't make it. I made it. And now I'm like, what the heck? Okay, let me go back and do some research. Like, what is this, right? What is this organization? Never heard about it. And it was so interesting. Once I got the note that says, congratulations, January, report to this place, bring this ID and all this. And I'm like, what did I get myself into? And they have another part of the organization that's in a different part of DC. It's not the actual White House, but we do have people that work there and at the White House. So the first time I'm just in a regular building, but you see all these White House pictures, you're like, oh my God, this is attached to the White House. So my first thing, Dave, is, you hear about that imposter syndrome. It's like, okay, I need to make sure that, right, this dumb mindset, right? They know that I belong here. I can't mess this up.
Yep.
Not only am I representing my family, but I'm representing the Army because it's a joint service organization. I'm also representing Compton, right?
Yeah.
That's always a badge within me. So it's like, I got to do this thing right.
Yep.
And I think the first time it was when I traveled, because I did a trip where I think it was Vice President Quayle, right? And I was like an assistant radio person. I wasn't doing my full thing yet. This is just how they indoctrinate you into getting you on the road. And just to see that, Air Force Two fly up, and it's like, holy moly, this is real, right? And then you got this barrier blocking off all these people at the airport, but I'm inside the barrier, right? I'm helping put radios inside these cars so they can communicate through the motorcade. And you got all these people cheering, and you're like, what are they cheering at? He's not here yet. And then you're like, oh my God, they think I'm Secret Service, right? They think I'm White House staff. So now you're like, okay, I really can't mess this up. And then when I did my first trip with President Bush Sr., that was amazing, because again, now you're in the back of your mind, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a part of history, even though I'm behind the scenes. But man, what better place to be than behind the scenes? And you got this clear view of history being made. And I think the time it really hit me when Bush lost, Clinton won, and then they instituted this new thing where Clinton would shake the hands of the people in the motorcade, right? And part of my job was, if you drove the motorcade, right, the comms car that we had, basically had all the communication stuff. And normally when they would get out to take the picture, it was pretty much the civilian staff doing it. But I had this one leader was like, hey, you guys in the motorcade just like them, so go get in line. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, go get in line. Just don't screw it up. So I'm in line, and the president's going through, shaking everybody's hand. Hey, thanks for your help, thanks for your assistance. And that's when it hit me, Dave, when I shook President Clinton's hand, and he said, thank you for what you do. And I'm like, holy smoke, a guy from Compton shaking the hands of a president of the United States.
Did you
You
say
can't.
anything? Did you say anything, or were you just frozen?
I was frozen, but then I just said, I think he said, thank you for your service. And I said, thank you, sir, or something like that. Because you know me, while you're in line, all these different thoughts are going through your head. And it's like, okay, bring it back, bring it back. Say something smart. Yeah. Don't mess this up, yeah. Right?
Yeah, that's all I'm thinking is, you saw Forrest Gump, I assume?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
He drank the 15 Dr. Peppers, and then he's trying to shake Kennedy's hand.
Yes, yes.
I can only imagine, though, like it must have been so surreal, almost like you were watching yourself about to shake the hand, and then I can't believe this is happening. And then, but it just goes to show, like, I don't know, I'm finding a hard time finding my words here, but
it's okay.
Here you are in this line shaking the hand of the president, say 1 year before or 2 years before, or 3, your mother's making you go to church. Like,
right.
That, how quickly did that space close for you? And because it doesn't sound like it was a plan. You just joined the military, and all of a sudden you're in the White House.
Exactly. And then when I found out, to me, what closed the gap for me was, and I have to go back, one of the things that helped me definitely throughout my time in the military, but especially, right, first assignment in Germany, first assignment in the Pentagon, and then going to the White House, is I connected with mentors. Throughout my whole life, I have always connected with a mentor. And that's one thing I tell people, regardless of what you want to do in life, what career path you want to take, if you can find a mentor, right, that can just help guide you, that you can just bounce ideas off of, you have a greater chance of achieving that goal. And you're still going to have some failure along the path, because failure is a part of success, but you will fail less than the person that's just trying to stumble their way through their gift or their talents.
Is that what you would say is your calling then? When you really think about it, do you feel like in some way that I found something that I never knew was available to me? I've got to tell a bunch of people. Is that really what it is?
For me, that's exactly what I did, Dave, because even though, right, I'm standing there and I'm shaking the president's hand and doing that, when I leave and go back to tear down the equipment, now what's going through my mind is, okay, how did I get here, right? And this feeling that I have that'll never be taken away. I mean, for history, I'll have this feeling. It was like, how do I duplicate this success? That was my mindset. It's like, how do I put the next right person that's coming after me? How do I train them? Right? How do I share with them? Not tell them what to do, Dave, but just ask them the right questions based on whatever they want to do. And then, like, how do you become the best of that?
Yeah. You strike me as very humble. And I wonder if that's what makes you effective at what you do. You didn't get someplace and say, hey, by the way, look at me. You just got someplace and you think, oh my goodness, I didn't expect to get here. Not that shaking the president's hand is the pinnacle of your career, because there's so many other things you've accomplished, but the fact that you're in the moment, you probably didn't see it coming. And how often do you run into people in your work, in your life, where they don't think anything's possible?
Oh yeah, definitely do that a lot. And I love meeting those people, because when I get to share my story, and like you said, I share it in a humble way, not in a bragging way, they're like, wow, maybe I can do something, different. And I'm like, absolutely you can. And two things I can tell you that help me to be humble. One, my mom, right? She was so funny. She was like, whatever you do, whether it's even when I went to the military, and then when I told her I was going to the Pentagon, I told her I was going to the White House, I'll just never forget, she would always say, whatever you do, act like you've been there before. Yeah. And at that time, it was like, what do you mean, act like you've been there before? I've never been there before. She's like, I know, but just act like it. Just fake it until you can figure out what everybody else is doing. That's the right thing to do. Yeah. And I'm telling you, Dave, that was some great advice. And then the second advice that I got to definitely make sure I stayed humble was my biggest mentor, Mr. Steve Smith. Oh, this guy, everything. He was kind of like the kingmaker at the White House Communication Agency, right? He was the chief of staff, chief operations. He's like that glue that knew what everything was going on and put people in the right places. And one of my first trips was with him. And I heard about him and I was like, man, can I like ask him just anything, or do I have to like, kiss the ring or something and get into the circle? And he was so open, Dave. And he was like, tell me about yourself, where you coming from, what's your goals? And once we started talking, he was immediately like, you know, one of the biggest things he told me was, you're going to make mistakes, right? Learn from your mistakes. When other people make mistakes, right? Don't crucify them, right? Find out why they made it, and then help them figure out how not to make it again. And then the third thing he told me, he was like, regardless of what you do in this job, wherever you go, the people you meet, he said, never get the big head. Because he said, as soon as you get the big head, he said, I'm telling you, mistakes are going to happen. You're going to forget why you're here, and you're going to get kicked out. And man, when he laid that out to me, Dave, it was like, no matter where I went, it was like, okay, zero in on what Steve Smith said.
So Darrell, now that you've had the experiences you've had, what would you say is the biggest misconception about Washington, D.C., the swamp, politics? Do you have a different impression now that you've kind of been in that environment for a period of time? What do people not understand about it?
I think what they don't understand is, and especially from my perspective, because I have a military background, so I meet a lot of retirees, and I would say that we have more in common than we do different. However, based on your agenda, right, you can find yourself right on a different side of the platform. And that's one thing I can say, Democrat, Republican, Independent, it doesn't matter. When I meet people, right, I'm trying to figure out, right, what are they good at? What's their passion? Is there anything they need me to do to either help them or just to encourage them, right? And everybody that I meet, they get that from me, right? They're like, man, I don't know why I'm talking to you, but it's a pretty good day, right? And then I'll just find, and that's from my basic training day, just finding a way to connect with that other person, right? And then just that common ground, right? I mean, that's one good thing. Obviously politics is definitely a poison pill, but everybody likes talking about sports. Everybody likes talking about their hometown or traditions. Um, there's more people in the DC area that connect that way than they are from that political scene.
So maybe less contentious than we would otherwise be led to believe.
Yes, yes. But again, less contention doesn't sell papers, doesn't make the news. So it's just more, based on what those individuals' goals are, they're going to push in front what they want. But I can tell you behind the scenes, like I got some friends, I mean, they're hardcore Republicans, right? And, I never say what I am, but they kind of figure out what it is. But when we talk, we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
It's so many other different things. There's like Dave, I was in Watchmen Kids with some guys that were, I mean, they're like, 20 something years old. They didn't even have a family, right? So when we come together, it's not about the current administration or the last administration. It's, oh my gosh, remember that trip we did when we had to go to Russia within like 5 days, or the president was going to Arkansas to talk to the people and look at the tornado damage. I mean, those are the stories that we talk about. And then we talk about our families, right? How's your son? How's your daughter, man? Do they know what you did? Like, me, I'm always pumping up people up, Dave. So I'm like, do your, kids know that you were a rock star back in the day, man? One of the best radio technicians of all time. They're like, they're coming to know that, but some of it, it's a little bit over their head, right? So that's always been my thing, is where's that common thing that we can talk about?
Okay, well, that's encouraging news. What about some of the things that you've done? You've had the opportunity to go to different places after natural disasters, right? To assess the situation after, say, a hurricane or a.
So every one of those stories, crazy situation, was all within my 20 years in the military, in my last 15 years working at the White House.
What was it like then? What was it like to show up as a representative of, say, the White House or the military, and you enter into a situation like that that's just pure disaster for people? What do you do? What do you say?
Dave, I'm telling you, the first thing that came to my mind when I found out, because my job at that time when I traveled on the presidential side, I was they call it an operations lead. So you're like the logistics person, right? This is back in the day where you only had one credit card that paid for everybody's room, everybody's vehicles, right? I was the face to talk to the hotel and all the logistics. And I'm telling you, that trip, I remember when they called me and said, "Hey, Darrell, you're one of the best ones we got. You're going to take the lead for this Arkansas tornado damage trip." And I'm like, obviously, I'm going to follow orders, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, man, should we even be there? Are we going to be in the way? I mean, those are the questions that you're asking yourself. So you got to go. So when I get there, I'm at the airport, I'm meeting the rep there, and I'm like, first of all, thanks for hosting us. I am so sorry. I apologize if we are doing anything that's going to hamper what you guys are trying to do within your community. I promise we're going to try our best. And everybody on the team felt the same way, right? We're going to try to tiptoe our way around, here's some of our requirements, but if that is crazy, right, we'll take less than. We do not want to get in the way. And I think, Dave, the key was since we had that type of approach, we didn't come in here with this, I'm with the president, meet my demands. I think they received us a lot better, right?
Right.
And then we went to the exact site where they're like, here's where he's going to speak, right? We're meeting the main people in charge, whether it's the mayor or the female rep there. And it's like, first of all, again, we're so sorry. Please let us know if we're in the way, if we need to move anything. And I think, again, having that humble approach allowed them to receive us better. And then here's what really got me, David. I never forget this. One of the key residents there, like one of the community leaders, right? It was like, "Hey, I heard you from the White House," one of those groups. I was like, "Yeah, if we're in the way, I'm sorry. Please let us know if we need to." And they were like, "No, we're glad you're here." And we were like, "Really?" And he was like, "Yeah, because in the midst of our devastation, we weren't sure if anybody really cared. We weren't sure if anybody really paid attention to how much damage happened. So in their mind, in the midst of all this, they're wondering who cares and do they really know how bad we have it?" And then here was the third thing, I never forget this. He said, "And I'm also hoping that when the news comes and cover this, that they also cover the part that shows how our community, Black, white, Hispanic, didn't matter. We all came together, different faiths, different religions. We all came together to rebuild our neighborhood."
Wow.
Dave, man, when he told me that, I was like, man, okay, what time do I get off of work and how can I come back and, help out, right? Because it
Yep.
was just amazing.
Well, now, were you trained that way, Darrell? Were you told go down and be humble? Or again, is this going back to your background where you just did what you thought was right, which is, I don't want to get in your way. Just tell us what we can do to help. Was that just you, or were you advised to be that way?
No, I think it was a combination of both. It started out my mom and dad telling me to be humble, especially my dad, man. My dad, he only had a sixth grade education, right? And I tell this to people, they're like, "Wait a minute, what?" I'm like, my dad actually picked cotton. Went to the sixth grade, and after he finished sixth grade, he had to get out of school and help pick cotton, right? So my dad never had an education. My mom, um, she was so funny. She had a lot of high school, and right before talking about being humble, while I'm in I had the 11th grade as well. My mom decided to go back to school to get her high school diploma. She was having trouble in math, and I would take her to school. Then normally I would drop her off and then come back. She's going to night school. And I remember she came home and she was telling me that everybody in the class was struggling with, this math. It was just high school math. And she was feeling sorry for everybody. And then she said, "Hey, if I ask my teacher, do you mind if coming and just maybe you can share it in a different way?" And I'm like, I'm only in the 11th grade and I don't know if I would take over your class like that. She said, "No, no, I'll check with the teacher." She checked with the teacher and he was so open. He was like, "Hey, anything to help everybody." And I just remember it was such an amazing experience. Whatever they were working on was something that I had did in 10th grade.
Wow.
So I just said, okay, let me go to the board. And I just thought about, this alternate way of trying to explain this in the most common way. And I just remember everybody's like, they're taking notes, they're asking questions. and they got through whatever that session was, and they all eventually passed. And I remember the teacher telling my mom, "You tell that kid he can come here anytime." And I'm like, no, that was a one-time deal, because one, I felt very uncomfortable. Two, I didn't think that was my place. But I just remember that moment of, if you can do something to help somebody, right? And just seeing the facial expressions on those adults,
Yep.
Dave, when they got, that's one thing, you see kids get it, right?
Yeah.
But man, when you see adults
Yep.
get something like that, man, I mean, it was just such a feeling. So I think for me, it was the part of definitely, what I was taught. But again, Steve Smith, I can never thank that guy enough. I'll try to call him at least. He's in Colorado. I try to reach out to him at least once a year just to say thank you. He's like, man, quit thanking me. We're colleagues now. I'm not your mentor anymore. But he doesn't realize, Dave, the seed that he planted. Because, our people like, want to be like Mike, right?
Yeah.
When all that came out, deep down, I really wanted to be like Steve Smith. It was like, I want to be the Steve Smith of my generation, where it doesn't matter who you are. If you came to this guy, it's like, okay, that's not my cup of tea, but let me point you to somebody who can help you. And to me, that's how he was. And that's pretty much a lot of what I do, is that Steve Smith effect. It's like, okay, if somebody wants to get into podcasting, I don't do podcasts, but I know this guy named Dave. He's really good at it. Let me try to set up the connection, right? I can't promise anything, but I can at least make the connection. And that's
Right.
just a part of who I am.
Well, I just wonder, I actually, I know that if you had a different attitude, if you were arrogant, or you decided to say, hey, and I'm going to tell everybody what I know and what I've learned, and I'm going to tell you how I'm going to help you, how you could just ruin it. You know what I mean? It would no. And how often do you run into like managers or leadership professionals that think they need to be a certain way because they've got the title? You go down to Arkansas as a representative from the White House, you could have easily gone down like, hey, we're from the White, you know what I mean, and ruined everything.
Yeah, I definitely saw, not within White House Communications, but definitely some of the other organizations that we work with. Not going to name them, but some of them did come in with, badges high, and you know what I mean, that type of attitude. And I'll never forget, I did this one trip. I was training somebody, and one of the goals I was teaching them that day was, know that you can get a lot more done being kind than you can with this flip top, as we call it, right? Identification that we have. And they're like, no, that's not true. I'm like, I'm telling you. I said, we're going to do an experiment, right? We're going to go to one of the sites, right? Because we would normally get there 7 days before the president shows up, right? So this is like day 4. So, hey, we're going to go there. We're going to do, I call it a site visit, right? Since we're in charge of all the people. Well, really, it was a communications officer in charge. But we were kind of like the logistics deputy, right? I was like, we're going to go visit the site, check on the people, and watch this experiment. So this is a side day where once you get in here, you're supposed to show some type of identification. That's always rule number 1. Nobody gets into these rooms. Nobody gets into this particular area without this type of ID. And the person, I tell you, has to have your ID ready just in case it doesn't work, right? We go up, right? And I'm like commenting the person, hey, how you doing? Man, we're so glad to be here in Chicago. This is great, right? Just doing conversation, dialoguing. And I'm thanking the person for, what they're doing for us, because I tell them that, without you, right, we couldn't set this up for the president, and then the visit wouldn't be as smooth, right? But you guys are giving us a lot of different things. You're allowing us to work with your schedules. I said, we just can't thank you enough. So we're just having this conversation, and my assistant is like, when he's going to ask to get in, right? And I'm like, oh, by the way, we're here to check on our team. We're the operation leads, right? We're the people that brought them in. And we just want to go and just make sure everything is good, see if they need us to make a lunch run for them, right? Because sometimes they're setting up satellites on the roof and things of that nature. I was like, oh man, I left my ID in the car. Need me to go in the car and get it or what? And they're like, oh no, go ahead.
Right.
You're good, Mr. Williams. And as we're walking, my assistant, it's like, but I thought they're not supposed to do that. I was like, they're not. But what I'm trying to tell you is, if you can find a way to connect with people, the ID should be the last resort.
Yep. They trusted you.
Absolutely.
They trusted you. They actually felt that you cared about them. You took the time to get to know them a little bit and treat them like a human being. I would assume that's got to be entrenched in the work you do day to day as you're coaching, whether it's through your workshops or speaking. Is that the ultimate message that you want people to hear?
Absolutely. It's a part of one, again, recognizing, like I said, everybody, right, has a gift, everybody has a talent. I still believe that no matter what. Now, environments and circumstances and life situations can affect how we use our gifts and how we use our talents. But every day that you wake up and breathe, you have a chance to get back on track, right? That's one thing I tell people. And then another thing, and people like you prove it to me as well, is sometimes our gifts and our talents can take us into multiple directions, right? I know just from talking to you, right? You're a family person, right? You got this neat background as far as what you do, right? But then look at you, you're also doing podcasting, right? Who says, well, Dave, you can only do one thing. You just need to pick that one thing and be good at it. Yes, that is good advice in certain situations, but my concept now is what other things can spin off of that one good thing that you were good at, Dave,
Yeah.
and that you probably still are, right? You do the podcasting and some other thing on the side, but your main bread and butter, obviously, you are the man, you're the expert when it comes to that. But that doesn't mean that you can't share that gift and that talent in a different way.
Right. But you got to take the time to find that one thing, right? I mean, that's where I think people get off track, is they think they have to be this forever.
Yes.
And they get stuck with whatever that is. And they don't love it enough to actually branch off of it. That's my experience, at least.
That is so true, Dave. And I come across a lot of leaders that say, well, Darrell, I can't talk to people the way you talk to people. Back in the day, you used to call it smoothing, right? It's like, Darrell, you're like the ultimate smoother. I don't have that gift. I'm like, no, you don't have to have the gift of smoothing. You just have to want to help.
Yeah.
So one thing I always tell people, they always say, it's like you're always into something. Like, how do you do that? And I always tell people, the one key thing that has always helped me is, where can you meet a need?
Mm-hmm.
So many people, they want to do this grand things, or I'll hear stuff like, if I had Oprah money, or if I had, Bill Gates money, I do this. I said, hold up. Okay, let's get back to that. As of right now, we don't have right that type of money.
Right.
However, and I always challenge people to Dave, and they want to disagree with me, but then they go, you're right. You have something that Oprah and Bill Gates does have, and that's time. So what if your time, right, every hour was equivalent to $100,000, right? What would be the best use of that time to meet a need? And when they go back and they start thinking, they're like, well, I'm not tied to like the St. Jude hospital. I said, no, don't think big.
Right.
Just think within your circle, within your neighborhood. I don't care if you're from Boston, Chicago, New York. Look around, just pause, because sometimes, Dave, we're so busy just living life.
Yeah.
We never pause enough to really look and see what's out there, right? Something that we can have an effect on ourselves. So just pause enough and just pay attention to what's around you.
Yeah.
And then they'll come back to me and say, oh my gosh, my son brought me this flyer where they were looking for mentors for this particular trip, or they were looking for tutors, right, for this particular thing. And I'm like, okay, just start with that. Yep. And then just see where it takes you. Don't do it for any other reason of, I really want to make a difference.
Yep.
Right. If they give me 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids, whatever, just do it. Career days, right? Obviously before COVID, right? A lot of schools will say, hey, we're looking for a professional to come in. Sometimes we're so busy, it's like, I don't have time to do that. Plus those kids don't want to hear from me. But they do want to hear from you, because they never met a Dave before. They don't know that they can have that career that you have, and you start telling them how you got into that career. They're like, wow, that doesn't seem hard. I mean, it definitely is hard work, right, but it doesn't seem like it's impossible. And that's what people need to hear. They need to hear that what you're trying to do and what you want to do, it's not impossible. And how about there's a lot of different ways that you can get into that particular industry, into that field. I remember, Dave, I did a career day, and I always tell them, right, give me the class that has the most excitement, meaning the class that nobody wants to go to, right? And they're like, are you sure, Mr. Williams? We don't want to scare you. I'm like, no, you won't scare me. And we go in there, and this kid, I can tell, man, he's like, no matter what this guy says, I'm not gonna believe him, right? So I'm like, hey, before we get started, I want to open up a question. Somebody, I'm an open book. Somebody give me a question that nobody's ever answered before. And I was hoping that he would like take the challenge. And most of the time, those kids are the ones that take the challenge, right? So I'll never forget Dave. He said, I got a question for you. I said, sure. He says, I want to own my own restaurant. You tell me how I can do that. Now, this is like, one of the neighborhood schools, right? And I go, okay, I'm going to tell you. I said, but it might not be the path that you were thinking about, but I'm going to tell you how it can work. And I just started going through these little things, Dave, getting a job part-time, washing dishes. He said, washing dishes? I said, hold up. Let me go through it. You're washing dishes, right? You're going to the person that owns the restaurant and you telling him your dream, right? I really want to own a restaurant when I get older. Can you help me? And I said, even while you're doing that, you got to be the best dishwasher. You got to be the best floor sweeper, right? You got to learn all these things. I said, why? Because you have to show them that there's something inside of you that says he's different from somebody else. Or he has that, we call it the it factor. There's something about this kid that he really wants to learn. I said, then when you tell that restaurant owner that that's your goal, and tell them that you want to be a sponge, let them pour into you. I said, and what'll happen is you'll start being that regular person. It's not just a summer gig. It's like, hey, come after school, right? They start showing you little things. They start showing you the books. They start showing you the operation. And then they're going to start asking you, what do you want to go to school? I don't want to go to school. I just want to own a restaurant. That mentor is going to tell you, hey, you need to go to school. You need to either get a degree in business or food service management. Whatever the case is, you have to show yourself an expert in that field. And he's like, okay, I can see all that. He said, but that still doesn't get me to own it. I said, now you keep doing it. You got to do your dues. You got to put in for it. And then here's what could happen. Nobody can say what the future holds, but here's some possible instances. That person could either A, not have any family and wants to sell it, right? And may, right, sell it to you. A, he may open up another place, right? And if you've done all these other things, put you in charge, you're kind of like that operations person, which gives you more experience. Or B, maybe they'll do different franchises and they'll groom you to eventually own your own restaurant within that franchise. So those are three different things that could happen if you take this path. When I finished, Dave, the guy was like, man, this is great. Nobody ever answered that question before, right? And then when we finished, right, got ready to leave, everybody shook my hand and all that good stuff. And I asked the teacher, I was like, so tell me about this kid. He was like, first of all, that's the first time he's been engaged all year.
Wow. Yeah.
Right. And so I take that stuff, I don't look at it as, wow, I'm this great person. I try to break it down, Dave. What did I do to get this kid's attention? And how can I replicate that to other people that come in to speak during career days?
I think you summed up exactly what it takes, and you actually referenced this earlier in the conversation, talking about just trying to survive in the neighborhood, worrying about people worrying about themselves. But I think the answer is really the opposite. Take interest in other people. And you didn't go into that class trying to tell people what you knew. You went into that class trying to figure out, is there anything that I can do to help you? And this one kid, hopefully he listened to you, because at that age, I would have been thinking, oh my God, I can do all this work, because I didn't have it in me. I'd be thinking same thing. But the answers are exactly what you said. And I know that's why he listened to you. And I know that's why the teacher was probably shocked. It's because you actually took the time, to listen to that kid and try to help him. So let me ask you this, Darrell, because I could talk to you all day. What didn't I ask you? I know there was some like standard questions I should have asked you, but I got off on a tangent here. Anything that I didn't ask you that we should talk about, or anything that you want to say to bring us home here?
I would just say, again, like we talked about the theme of this whole podcast, right? Everybody, either has a gift or has a talent, right? Or has something that the world needs. I would always share with people is put yourself in a position to maximize your talents or your gifts, whatever you want to call it, but put yourself in that position. If that means I have to take some humble pie and listen more to my parents, if that means I need to go get a mentor, right? That means I need to go mend some relationships that I broke because people were trying to help me and I didn't realize it because I wanted to do my own thing or do it my own way, right? Go into this new year, right, with, you know what, I'm going to do it a little bit different this time, right? I'm going to put in that extra elbow grease. I'm going to put in that extra learning hat, right? I'm going to be a little bit more of a listener, right? Because I always tell people, Dave, somebody in this world needs what you have to offer, right? As much as I love helping people, as much as I love coaching people and being a keynote speaker, I'm not going to speak to every person that needs to hear that message. But there's somebody, right, that's and going into this next year, Dave, you're going to get invited to some place. You can already know it. Something's going to happen. And somebody there is going to need to hear what you have to say. They need to hear your journey, right? They need to hear your challenges as a family man and also as a business person. And you just never know, right? Especially in today's society, how that person might have been hanging on, right? Their last whatever. And it's like, man, now that I heard Dave, I think I got a little bit extra inside of me now. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper, or I'm going to tie a knot in that rope that I was about to let go and just try to make it better, tomorrow.
Right.
Right. I always tell people another thing is, don't compare yourself to others. Right. Somebody might want to be a great podcast guest. Dave's been doing this thing a lot longer than others. So you can't compare yourself to Dave. Right. You're in year one, Dave's in year 12. Right. It's unfair to compare your year one with Dave's year 12. But what you can do is compare yourself to where you were last week. Right? Can I be better next week than I was last week? Can I make a better decision tomorrow than I did today? Right? If you're a family person, right? Can I treat my spouse better next week than I treated them last week? Can I treat my child, right? Have a better conversation with them next week than I did last? If you can just compete with yourself in whatever arena, whatever area, whatever industry or other part of your life is, I think you're going to surprise yourself with what's going to happen in the end.
Oh, such great advice. It's such great advice. It's spot on. I love that advice. Darrell, thank you very much for being with me today. I don't know what you celebrate, but if it's Christmas, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. And I really enjoyed this conversation.
Dave, I did too. And again, I just can't thank you enough for doing what you do, to bring in all the different people with different mindsets and be able to share with an audience that may have never heard something that's going to help them. I just really think podcast hosts are these new unsung heroes that's really adding a lot of value to the world. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. We'll talk soon.
Have a good one, Dave.